I returned 3 days early from a business trip, hoping to surprise my wife, Claire. I had been gone for almost 2 weeks. And the last thing I expected was to come home to a situation that would flip my world upside down. I remember driving home from the airport, my mind racing with excitement. I couldn't wait to see Claire, to relax with her after being away for so long. We had a solid relationship, at least, I thought we did. We had been married for 7 years, and we had a 6-year-old daughter, Emma. Everything had seemed fine, or so I believed. But when I walked through the door of our house, something felt off. The air was different, tense. I didn't know why at first. I set my bag down and called out for Claire and Emma, but there was no response. I found Claire in the living room, sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. She quickly put it down when she saw me, a smile forming on her face, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ryan. You're back early," she said, standing up to give me a hug. Her embrace felt stiff, almost mechanical, but I chalked it up to her being caught off guard. "I wanted to surprise you," I replied, trying to ignore the slight oddness in her tone. "How's everything been while I was gone?" "Oh, you know, same old," she answered quickly, brushing past the question. I noticed she wasn't looking me in the eyes. I didn't think much of it at first, but the unease lingered. "I'm so glad you're back," she added, her voice lighter now, but still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Emma came running into the room, her little face lighting up when she saw me. She hugged me tightly, and I smiled, feeling the relief of finally being home with them. But something about the way Claire was acting, it wasn't like her. She didn't seem upset or sad, but there was an underlying distance between us that I couldn't explain. She was too neutral. Almost too calm, like she was avoiding any deeper conversation. I didn't jump to conclusions, maybe she just needed time to adjust to my sudden return. We spent the evening together as a family, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Claire's behavior felt off, but I didn't know why. She seemed preoccupied, distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. It was subtle, but it was enough to make me pause. The next day, Claire and Emma packed their things and went to visit her parents for a few days. She told me it was a last-minute trip, that Emma had been begging to see her grandparents. I didn't argue. I thought it would be nice for them to have some time together, and it would give me a chance to catch up on some work around the house. But my instincts were still on edge. I couldn't stop thinking about the strange tension between Claire and me, and the odd way she'd been acting. I pushed the thought aside, but the unease didn't go away. A few days later, I ran into Nancy, the house cleaner who had been with us for years. She came in once a week to help us out, and we always had small talk while she did her work. As I was heading out to the store, she pulled me aside in the kitchen, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "You know, Ryan, I've been cleaning the windows at the neighbor's place in the evening sometimes," she began. "And I've noticed something strange." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Nancy hesitated, looking around as if she was worried someone would hear. "Well, I don't want to get in trouble, but I've seen Claire's neighbor, Luke, you know him, coming over quite a bit lately. He's been coming over in the evenings when you're not home, and sometimes, I hear them talking through the walls." My stomach dropped. Luke? Our neighbor, Luke? I never thought much of him. He was married with kids, a guy who kept to himself. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my mind was already racing. Nancy nodded. "I'm not one to spread rumors, Ryan, but it's hard to ignore. He's been there several times, sometimes for hours. I didn't want to say anything, but you've been gone a lot, and I just thought you should know." I was stunned. Luke? Claire? What the hell was going on? I didn't respond right away. I was still processing the information, trying to make sense of it. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I spent the next few hours trying to distract myself, but all I could think about was Nancy's words. Why hadn't I noticed the signs? Claire's strange behavior, her being more distant than usual, could it all be connected? I couldn't ignore this anymore. I needed answers. I wasn't going to let this situation fester without knowing what was really going on. So I decided to investigate, starting with Luke. After what I heard from Nancy, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. There was more going on than I had originally thought, and I needed to get to the truth. I wasn't just going to confront Claire without understanding exactly what had been happening behind my back. I needed evidence, proof that I wasn't just jumping to conclusions. But instead of relying on Nancy for more vague hints, I decided to take matters into my own hands. The first thing I did was install a small security camera in the front yard, discreetly placed near the window by the front door. It wasn't an elaborate setup, but I knew that if Luke was coming over like Nancy said, it would be hard to miss. I kept the camera aimed at the driveway in the front entrance, knowing that any suspicious activity would be caught. I wasn't proud of doing this. It felt invasive, but I knew I had to know the truth. There was no way I was going to let Claire keep lying to me without understanding just how deep the deception went. The camera was up and running by the time Claire and Emma left for her parents' house again. I told Claire I had some work to catch up on at home, that I'd be taking the day to get things in order. I didn't think she would suspect anything. But now, every time I got an alert on my phone from the security system, my heart would race, waiting to see if Luke would show up. I saw Luke walk up to our front door, the casual knock, and Claire letting him in. It wasn't just once, it was multiple times, always in the evenings, when I was away on business or out running errands. The first time I saw him come inside, I felt a sickening knot in my stomach. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that maybe they were just friends, but the longer I watched, the more it became clear this wasn't innocent. There was no platonic reason for him to be at our house so often, especially when Claire knew I was out of town. The following evening, the camera caught them again. This time, I saw them standing close to each other, talking in low voices by the door. I couldn't hear their words, but the body language, the way they leaned into each other, said everything. They weren't just neighbors catching up. That was all the proof I needed. I spent the next few hours stewing in a mix of rage and disbelief. I couldn't stop watching the footage, each clip burning through me like a hot knife. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to my face? I had trusted Claire with everything, and now it felt like she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. The anger inside me surged. I had to confront her. I had to confront both of them, and I had to make them understand the damage they had done. That night, when Claire returned from her parents' house with Emma, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I didn't want to yell or lose control. I wanted answers. I needed to see if she would admit it without me throwing everything in her face. She came into the living room, smiling at Emma as she ran to me for a hug. But as soon as Claire saw my face, she stopped, sensing something was wrong. "Ryan, what's going on?" she asked, her voice already shaky. "You're scaring me." I didn't waste time. I went straight to the point. "Who's been coming over while I'm not here, Claire?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Why has Luke been at our house so often?" Claire froze. Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it, but then her eyes filled with guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. "Claire, don't lie to me." "I have the footage," I said, my eyes narrowing. "I know everything." She opened her mouth again, but the words stumbled out in a barely audible whisper. "Ryan, I didn't want you to find out this way." I took a deep breath, feeling my hands shake with the adrenaline that coursed through me. So it's true, then? You've been seeing him behind my back. She dropped her head into her hands, sobbing. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I'm so sorry, Ryan. I've messed up. I never wanted to hurt you. Her apology felt hollow. It didn't change the fact that she had betrayed my trust, that she had lied to me for so long. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the way I expected to be. Instead, I was numb. I was done. I wasn't going to scream or make a scene. I just wanted the truth. And now that I had it, I didn't know what to do next. I stood there for a moment, staring at Claire as she cried. The weight of everything was heavy on my chest, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to try and fix things, but another part, the part that had been betrayed, wanted nothing more than to walk away. I didn't know what to do. I never meant to hurt you, Claire said between sobs, her voice barely audible. I was confused, and I didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't want to ruin what we had. I wanted to shout, to scream at her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. There was something about her vulnerability that made the whole situation worse. I didn't know what was real anymore. Was she really sorry, or was she just sorry that she'd been caught? I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. You've been lying to me for months. You let this happen right under my nose. And now you're telling me you didn't want to ruin everything? Claire looked up at me, her face flushed with tears. I was scared, Ryan. I didn't know how to fix it, how to make things better between us. I've been feeling disconnected from you for a while, and then Luke was there. He listened to me. He understood. I felt a surge of anger at her words. So that's it? You couldn't talk to me, so you decided to cheat? That's your excuse? She shook her head, looking guilty but also desperate. I never meant for it to go this far. It was a mistake. A huge one. And I don't know how to fix it. I couldn't take it anymore. The disappointment, the betrayal, the lies, it was all too much. I had loved this woman for years, had trusted her with everything. And now she was telling me it had all fallen apart because she felt disconnected? That was it? I can't do this, Claire, I said, finally letting the words spill out. I can't just forgive you for this. I can't act like everything's okay when it's not. She looked at me, pleading with her eyes. Please, Ryan, don't say that. Please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. I stood there, feeling torn. The part of me that still loved her wanted to believe her, wanted to try and make it work. But the part of me that had been hurt, the part that had seen the betrayal firsthand, was screaming at me to walk away. I don't think we can, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You've already made your choice. And I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. She broke down completely, crying uncontrollably. It was the first time I'd seen her this vulnerable, but it didn't move me. I was done. I think you should leave, I said firmly, though every word felt like a weight. I need space to think. Claire didn't argue. She just nodded, tears still streaming down her face. She grabbed her things and left the house, taking Emma with her to her parents' house. The house felt empty, and for the first time in years, I was completely alone. But instead of feeling relief, I felt a deep sense of emptiness. I didn't know what to do next, where to go from here. I had everything I needed to walk away from her, but the aftermath felt like a black hole. The following days were a blur. Claire called me several times, but I ignored every call. She left messages, begging me to listen, to give her a chance to explain. But there was nothing left to explain. I had the facts. I had the proof. I threw myself into work, into my bicycle repair shop. I spent hours fixing broken frames, tuning gears, and getting bikes back in top condition. It was mindless work, but it kept me busy, kept me from thinking about the mess that was my personal life. I enjoyed the quiet of the shop, the simple satisfaction of fixing something, of making it work again. It felt like a small escape from the chaos. But even as I worked, my thoughts kept circling back to the same thing: how could she do this? The emotional toll was heavier than I'd anticipated. I felt lost, like I was floating through life without any real direction. Claire had been such a huge part of my world, and now I felt like a stranger in my own life. I couldn't bring myself to reach out to anyone for help, not yet. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want people telling me it was going to be okay. I didn't want to hear that she'd made a mistake and could change. I knew the truth. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. Then, a week later, I got a call from Luke. I wasn't surprised, but the timing was a shock. He left a voicemail, and when I listened to it, I was filled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. He didn't apologize for what had happened. Instead, he said, "I know this has been hard on both of us, Ryan. But Claire and I are trying to figure things out. I just wanted to clear the air. You've been hurt, and I get it. But this isn't just on her. We both made choices." I couldn't believe it. He was still trying to justify what he had done. Still trying to make himself out to be the victim. That was the moment I knew I had to take control. I couldn't let this man, this situation, drag me down anymore. Claire had hurt me. Luke had hurt me. But the only way I was going to get through this was by reclaiming my life. I didn't call Luke back. I didn't want to hear any more of his half-hearted excuses. I didn't need them. The truth was, I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the manipulation. Done with trying to make sense of something that would never make sense. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing: I was going to rebuild my life, on my terms. I wasn't going to let this define me. It was late afternoon when I received the call. The shop had been quiet, and I was in the middle of adjusting a bike when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. It was my mom. I answered quickly, trying to sound normal. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" Her voice was shaky, and I immediately knew something was wrong. "Ryan, you need to come to the hospital. It's your sister, Lauren. She's been in an accident." My blood ran cold. What happened? Is she okay? There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear her trying to hold it together. She was hit by a car while crossing the street. She's stable, but... Ryan, it's bad. You need to come now. I didn't hear the rest of her words. The world seemed to stop in that instant. My mind raced, my body stiffened with shock. My little sister, Lauren, was always the wild one, the free spirit, the one who never sat still. I couldn't picture her in a hospital bed. Not like this. She was supposed to be the strong one. The one who always had it together. And now she was lying in a hospital bed, possibly fighting for her life. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and rushed out of the shop, locking the door behind me without even bothering to close up properly. I drove to the hospital with one thought in mind: I had to be there. I had to see for myself that she was okay. The drive felt like it took an eternity. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white. My mind was a blur of confusion, fear, and disbelief. I couldn't focus on anything else. Not the pain Claire had caused me, not the betrayal, not the emptiness I'd been feeling. It all faded into the background as I raced toward the hospital. When I finally arrived, my mom was waiting in the lobby, her face pale and drawn. She rushed to me, pulling me into a tight hug. For a moment, I just held her. There were no words. We didn't need them. We both knew how bad this was. Is she okay? I asked, my voice tight, struggling to maintain some semblance of control. She's in surgery, my mom replied, her voice shaking. They're doing everything they can. She was unconscious when they brought her in. Ryan, I don't know what to think. I wanted to scream, to run into that operating room and demand they fix her, make her okay. But I couldn't. I had to wait. And in the waiting room, I sat in silence, unable to move, unable to think. I couldn't focus on anything but the crushing weight in my chest. I don't know how long I was there before the doctor came out to speak with us. His face was grave, and I felt a knot form in my stomach as he walked toward us. Ryan, Mrs. Miller, he said, his voice calm but firm. We've done everything we can. Your sister has sustained serious injuries, but she's stable for now. The next 24 hours will be critical. We'll be monitoring her closely. I nodded mechanically, unable to process the gravity of what he was saying. She was stable, but for how long? The thought was unbearable. The doctor explained her injuries in more detail, but I could barely hear him. My mind was spinning, unable to focus on anything beyond the overwhelming feeling that my sister, the person I had always relied on in my life, was lying in a hospital bed, barely clinging to life. I stayed at the hospital for the next few hours, too emotionally drained to go anywhere, too exhausted to even speak. The emotional toll of the past few weeks, the betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak, was now compounded by this. My sister was in the fight of her life, and all I could do was wait. I couldn't process it all. I couldn't deal with the pain I had been burying for so long, the weight of Claire's infidelity, the betrayal that had shaken me to my core. It felt like everything was collapsing at once. I couldn't be strong anymore. I had been holding it together for so long, pretending like I was fine, like I had everything under control. But now, standing there in the sterile, white-walled hospital room, I was cracked open. The hours dragged on. At some point, I managed to sleep for a few minutes, my head resting on my arms as I slumped in a chair. I felt numb, emotionally and physically drained. When I woke up, it was dark, and I found my mom sitting beside me, her eyes red from crying. She's awake, she whispered, her voice shaking with relief. Ryan, she's awake. They said she's going to be okay. I couldn't believe it. I stood up quickly, my legs weak from sitting for so long, and followed my mom to Lauren's room. When I saw her, lying there in a hospital bed with bandages wrapped around her head and tubes running through her, my heart broke. But there was something in her eyes, something that told me she was fighting, that she was going to make it through. We sat with her for hours, talking quietly, reassuring her, trying to help her feel safe again. But inside, I was falling apart. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the anger, the fear for my sister, it was too much. I didn't know how to process it, how to move forward from here. And as I sat there beside Lauren, watching her sleep, I realized something that terrified me. I didn't have the strength to face it all anymore. Not the betrayal, not the anger toward Claire, not the heartbreak. I was emotionally exhausted. I had no fight left in me. The days following a whirlwind of emotions. The relief that she was going to be okay had not yet fully settled in, and I still felt like I was walking through a fog. It was a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. On one hand, I was deeply grateful to still have my sister with me, but on the other, everything I had been burying inside, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, was starting to bubble up, demanding my attention. I needed a break. A real one. I'd been putting off the idea of a trip for a while, but I knew I couldn't stay in this house any longer. I needed to clear my mind, and more importantly, I needed to be with Emma. I needed to remind myself that there was still joy in life. She was my anchor, my reason to keep moving forward. I decided to take Emma on a short trip, a weekend getaway to a cabin by the lake, a place we'd visited a few times before. The kind of place where we could disconnect from the world for a while and just focus on each other. I knew it was exactly what we needed. I didn't tell Claire right away. I wasn't ready to face her again, not yet. The last few weeks had been filled with painful conversations, and I wasn't sure I could handle another one. But eventually, I had to. "Claire, I'm taking Emma on a trip," I said one evening after dinner. She had been quiet lately, as if unsure how to approach me. "We're going to the cabin by the lake for the weekend." Claire looked at me, her eyes flashing with something I couldn't read. "Oh. That sounds nice. Can I come with you guys?" I was taken aback by the question. My first instinct was to say no. It felt wrong, like it would be a step backward for me. A step backward for us. I wasn't ready to be around her, especially not after everything that had happened. I wasn't ready to pretend like everything was okay. "No, Claire," I said, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. "I think it's better if Emma and I go alone. We need time together, just the two of us." She looked at me, her expression softening for a moment. "I understand," she said quietly, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I just thought it would be nice to spend some time as a family. You know, with everything that's been going on." I could feel the weight of her words, but I didn't let them affect me. Not now. I couldn't afford to let her back in, not yet. The distance between us was still too wide, too raw. I had to protect myself, and I needed space to heal. "I know, Claire. But this is something Emma and I need right now. I hope you understand," I said, my voice softer this time, though my resolve was still strong. She nodded, her lips pressed together in a thin line. "Okay. I get it. I miss how things used to be, Ryan." Her words stung, but I didn't let them show. I couldn't. I had already given her too many chances. She had broken my trust, and while I was trying to move forward, I wasn't ready to have her back in my life just yet. It would take time. I knew that. But time was the one thing I wasn't willing to rush. The rest of the evening passed quietly. I packed for the trip, trying to ignore the hollow ache in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. But I knew one thing for sure, I needed this time alone with Emma. She deserved it, and so did I. The next morning, Emma and I packed the car, ready to head out for the weekend. I hadn't told her much about why we were going, just that it was a special trip for the two of us. Her face lit up as we pulled out of the driveway, and I felt a small sense of relief wash over me. I had been so consumed by everything with Claire that I had forgotten what it felt like to just be present with Emma. We arrived at the cabin by midday, and as soon as we stepped inside, it felt like the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. The quiet of the forest, the smell of the pine trees, the sound of the lake rippling gently against the shore, it was like a breath of fresh air after weeks of suffocating stress. We spent the afternoon walking by the lake, skipping stones, and talking about everything and nothing. Emma was so excited to be there, and her energy was contagious. For the first time in a long while, I felt a little bit of peace. That night, we sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows and making s'mores. It was simple, but it was enough. I looked at Emma, her face glowing in the light of the fire, and realized that this was exactly what I needed. I didn't need Claire, not right now. I needed time with my daughter. I needed to remember who I was, outside of all the mess. As the weekend went on, I felt myself slowly begin to relax. I wasn't thinking about Claire's betrayal anymore, and I wasn't worrying about all the things I couldn't control. I was focused on Emma, on the love and connection we shared. This trip was giving me the space to heal, and that was exactly what I needed. But as much as I tried to let go, Claire's face kept creeping into my mind. I couldn't shake the image of her standing there, looking at me with those sad eyes, asking if she could come with us. Part of me felt guilty for saying no, but the other part of me knew it was the right decision. We weren't a family anymore. Not the way we used to be. And I wasn't ready to pretend otherwise. On the last night of our trip, Emma fell asleep early after a long day of exploring, leaving me sitting on the porch, staring out at the stars. I couldn't help but think about the future. What did it look like now? What would it look like when I went back home? I didn't have all the answers. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. I was healing. Slowly, but surely. The weekend with Emma had been everything I needed. A brief escape from the chaos, a time to breathe and reconnect. But as the days passed after returning home, the weight of everything began to settle back into my bones, heavier than before. I had hoped that some distance would help me move on, help me make sense of the mess Claire had caused, but it only made me more exhausted. But despite all the pain and frustration, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was exhausted from this entire ordeal. The emotional toll of trying to understand, the anger, the betrayal, it was like I had run a marathon I didn't know I had signed up for, and now, I was left with nothing but emptiness. The day came when Claire finally stopped calling. She knew I was done. She had been punished, in her way. I didn't need to do anything else to make her suffer. Her reputation was shattered, her job affected, her relationship with me beyond repair. The punishment she received was more than enough for me. And yet, it felt hollow. I wasn't feeling vindicated. I wasn't feeling relief. It was just exhaustion. A few days after returning, I noticed Emma seemed withdrawn. She wasn't the happy, carefree girl I had known. She missed her mother, of course. But there was something else. The tension, the heaviness in the house, had seeped into her as well. I could see it in her eyes. After a quiet dinner one evening, Emma finally spoke up. "Dad, I don't think I can stay here right now." I looked at her, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She looked down at her plate, her voice soft. "I want to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a while. It's just too much. I need a break." It broke my heart, but I understood. The environment at home had become tense, and she had been caught in the middle of it all. Her mother's betrayal, my anger, it wasn't fair to her. I had thought that by taking her on this trip, we could leave everything behind, but it wasn't that simple. She wasn't immune to the emotional fallout. I didn't argue. "Okay, Emma. If that's what you want, we'll make it happen." The next day, Emma packed a small suitcase and went to stay with my parents. It was a relief for both of us, I think. For Emma, it was a chance to get away from the strain of everything that had happened. For me, it gave me a bit of space to try and figure out what came next. The house felt eerily quiet after Emma left. There was no sound of her laughter, no little feet running down the hallway. It was just me and the emptiness that came with it. Claire was no longer here, and now, neither was Emma. I could hear my own thoughts clearer than ever, and it only added to the exhaustion. I spent the days cleaning up the remnants of the life Claire and I had shared. The pictures, the items around the house that reminded me of better times, of a time when I thought we were a family, went into boxes, tucked away, and forgotten. I didn't need those reminders anymore. I kept working at my bicycle repair shop, focusing on the small tasks that kept me busy. But inside, I felt like I was going through the motions. I knew I had made the right decision. I knew Claire's betrayal was something I couldn't just forgive. But at the same time, I was drained. Emotionally, physically, mentally, I was running on empty. After a week, Emma called me. She sounded better. Lighter, even. "Dad, I think I'm ready to come home," she said. "Grandma and Grandpa are great, but I miss you." I felt a sense of relief wash over me. She was okay. She needed time, but now she was ready to come back. When Emma returned, there was a quiet peace in the house. It wasn't the same as before, how could it be, but it felt like we were beginning to rebuild. Slowly. One step at a time. Claire tried to reach out again a few times, but I kept the distance. I didn't want her back. I didn't need the pain of reopening old wounds. She had done enough to destroy everything we had, and I wasn't about to let her back into my life. Not now. Not ever. But what did the future hold for me? For Emma? I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't weighed down by the past anymore. I wasn't consumed by the anger or the heartbreak. I was starting to feel like I could move forward, and that thought, though uncertain, brought a small sense of hope. Maybe it wouldn't be easy. Maybe it wouldn't be perfect. But I was ready to try. For Emma. For myself. For the future that was still waiting for us.